I'm William, 24 male, and my family celebrated my brother's acceptance to med school with a huge party, but when I got in, they told me they never thought I'd make it. It's a strange thing to have your greatest accomplishment met with a verbal shrug. For years, I had been running a race, and when I finally crossed the finish line, I looked up to see my family looking at their watches, surprised the race was even over. The finish line itself, the achievement I had bled for, was secondary to their astonishment that I had managed to complete the course at all. My family operates on a simple, unspoken system of orbits. My father, Mark, is the sun, a loud gravitational force whose moods dictate the climate of our entire household. My mother, Susan, is the closest planet, trapped in his orbit, reflecting his light and warmth but generating none of her own. She is a creature of conflict avoidance, a professional smoother of feathers whose primary role is to ensure the sun is never displeased. Then there is my brother, Daniel. 2 years my senior, Daniel is Jupiter, the favored giant, the one everyone looks at in awe. And my younger sister Chloe is a comet, flitting in and out, demanding attention with her bright, fiery tail before disappearing again into her own world. And me, I was always Pluto, the distant, cold, and mostly forgotten one, officially part of the system but small enough and far enough away that my presence was often an afterthought, a piece of trivia you had to be reminded of. Oh right, William, their other son. The dynamic was cemented early on. Daniel was the golden boy destined for greatness from the moment he could form a coherent sentence. He was charismatic, athletic, and effortlessly smart in a way that people found charming. My intelligence was quieter, more methodical. I didn't have his easy confidence. I had a dogged persistence that in the family narrative was framed as a struggle. Daniel glided, I plodded. I remember our fourth grade science fair with a clarity that still stings. Daniel, then in sixth grade, built a magnificent papier-mâché volcano. It was a classic, complete with baking soda and vinegar lava that erupted beautifully over the gymnasium floor. It was impressive, a visual spectacle. My father spent weeks helping him, his booming laughter echoing from the garage as they painted the cone and tested the reaction. He won first place. My parents were ecstatic. Dad bought him a brand new telescope, a real one with polished lenses and a sturdy tripod, and gave a loud, proud speech at the dinner table about Daniel's innate scientific genius. That same year, I entered the fair with a project on Mendelian genetics, illustrated through the cross-pollination of pea plants I had meticulously grown in our backyard for 3 months. My display board was covered in Punnett squares and detailed observations. It was complex, nerdy, and required a lot of reading to understand. I received an honorable mention. When I showed my parents the ribbon, my mother gave me a quick, distracted hug. "Oh, that's lovely, sweetie, very smart." My father squinted at my board, which was propped up against the kitchen counter. "Genetics, huh?" he grunted, taking a sip of his coffee. "A bit too complicated for anyone to really care about, isn't it? People like things they can see, like a volcano." The telescope sat in Daniel's room, gathering dust after a week. My pea plants, which I had nurtured from seedlings, were eventually torn up by my mom to make more room for her rose bushes. The message was clear. A flashy, superficial success was worth more than a quiet, profound one. Daniel's win was a family triumph. My honorable mention was a quirky hobby. This pattern repeated itself endlessly. When Daniel turned 17, he was gifted a brand new, gleaming silver sedan. The justification was his good grades and his responsible nature. He needed a reliable car to get to his various sports practices and social events. My parents stood on the driveway beaming as my father tossed him the keys. It was a coronation. 2 years later, I turned 17. My grades were factually better than Daniel's had been. I was co-captain of the debate team and had a part-time job at the library. I had saved up a respectable amount of money, hoping to put it toward a used car of my own. On my birthday, my father led me outside, not to a new car, but to the family's 10-year-old minivan. It was a behemoth, smelling faintly of stale crackers and Chloe's forgotten gym socks. Several dents adorned its sliding doors like battle scars. "Here you go," my dad said, dropping the keys into my palm. They felt heavy and worn. "We're giving you the van." My heart sank. The van, but Daniel got a car. My father sighed, the sound of a man burdened by an unreasonable child. Daniel's situation was different. "This will build character, William. You need to learn about responsibility, about maintaining an older vehicle. It's not always about getting what's shiny and new." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I was the one with the job, the one who meticulously saved, yet I was the one who needed to learn responsibility. Daniel, who had never worked a day in his life, was handed a symbol of freedom with no strings attached. Driving that van to school was a unique form of social humiliation. It was a rolling, beige symbol of my status in the family, practical, dependable, and deeply unglamorous. But the pinnacle of the Daniel-centric universe, the event that cast the longest shadow, was his medical school acceptance party. Daniel had always said he wanted to be a doctor, and my parents latched onto this with a fervor that was almost frightening. "Our son, the doctor," my father would boom to anyone who would listen, long before Daniel had even taken the MCAT. His acceptance into a respectable state medical school was treated like a royal wedding, and a Nobel Prize ceremony rolled into one. My mother, a woman who usually considered planning a Sunday dinner an organizational challenge, transformed into a world-class event planner. They rented a hall at the local country club. Caterers were hired. A string quartet was booked to play classical music in the corner. Over 100 people were invited: family, friends, my father's business associates, neighbors we barely knew. I spent most of that party standing near the appetizer table, a fixed, polite smile on my face. I felt like a stranger at my own family's event. My parents were holding court, radiating pride. My father clapped Daniel on the back so many times I thought he might leave a permanent handprint. He gave a long, emotional speech, his voice thick with unshed tears. "To see your son achieve his lifelong dream, there's no greater feeling for a parent," he said, raising his glass. "Daniel has made us the proudest parents in the world. He has the mind, the heart, and the character to be a truly great physician." To Daniel. The room erupted in applause. To Daniel, they echoed. I applauded with them, a knot tightening in my stomach. I was proud of my brother, I truly was. But as I watched him bathed in the golden glow of our family's adoration, I felt a familiar, chilling invisibility. No one knew that I shared the exact same dream. I was also pre-med. I was also taking the same brutal organic chemistry and biology courses. I was also planning to spend my summer studying for the MCAT, but my ambition was never mentioned. It was a quiet, private thing, like a book I was reading under the covers with a flashlight. In the bright glare of Daniel's success, my own aspirations were rendered completely invisible. That night, I promised myself that I would make it too. I would get into medical school, and then finally they would have to see me. They would have to be proud of me too. It was a foolish, naive hope, but it was the fuel that kept me going. The 2 years that followed Daniel's party were a blur of caffeine-fueled nights and relentless study. While my brother was navigating his first year of med school, calling home with stories of anatomy labs and challenging rotations, I was buried in textbooks, my life narrowed to a singular focus: the MCAT. My family treated my seclusion with a kind of benign neglect. To them, I was just being William, holed up in my room with my complicated books. They never asked about the specifics of my studies, and I never offered. It was easier that way. The silence was a shield, protecting my fragile ambition from the casual dismissal I had come to expect. I took the MCAT and did well, better even than Daniel had. I spent months crafting my applications, pouring my heart into personal essays, and traveling for interviews, all largely under the family radar. To them, it was just another of my quiet, intense projects like the science fair or my debate club preparations. It didn't seem real to them, and because of that, I was terrified it wasn't real for me either. The day the emails were supposed to go out, I was a wreck. I couldn't sit still. I must have refreshed my inbox 1,000 times between 8 a.m. and noon. My best friend Leo was texting me every 20 minutes. Anything yet, he'd write, followed by a string of encouraging emojis. Leo was the only person who understood the crushing weight of this day. He had been my study partner, my cheerleader, and my confidant throughout the entire grueling process. At 1:12 p.m. it arrived. The subject line was stark: an update to your application. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of hope and fear. My hand trembled as I clicked the link and logged into the applicant portal. I held my breath, my eyes scanning the screen for the keywords, and then I saw it. "Congratulations! The Committee on Admissions is pleased to offer you a place in the entering class." I didn't even read the rest. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. I had done it. After all the years of feeling like I was on the outside looking in, after all the quiet work and lonely nights, I had made it. I pushed my chair back from my desk and let out a sob that was equal parts laughter and relief. I was going to be a doctor. The thought was so immense, so powerful, it felt like my entire world had just clicked into focus. My first call was to Leo. He screamed so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "I knew it," he yelled. "Will, I am so incredibly proud of you, we have to celebrate." "We will," I promised, my voice thick with emotion. "But first I have to tell my parents." Leo went quiet for a beat. "You sure?" he asked softly. He knew the whole story. He had seen the toll my family's dynamic had taken on me. "I have to," I said, more to convince myself than him. "This is it, Leo. This is the thing they can't ignore. They have to be happy about this." Full of a nervous, hopeful energy, I grabbed my keys and drove over to my parents' house. This was the moment I had fantasized about for years. I pictured the scene in my head, the surprise, the dawning pride on my father's face, the warm hug from my mother. Maybe they would even apologize for ever doubting me. Maybe this would be the great reset button for our entire relationship. I found them in the living room. My dad was watching a golf tournament on TV, a bowl of peanuts resting on his stomach. My mom was knitting, her needles clicking together in a steady, rhythmic pattern. Chloe was sprawled on the other couch, scrolling through her phone, a look of sublime boredom on her face. The air was thick with comfortable Sunday afternoon inertia. I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding. "Hey," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Three pairs of eyes drifted toward me. "William," my dad said, not taking his eyes off the screen. "What's up?" I have some news," I said, stepping into the room. "I got an email today from the medical school." My mother paused her knitting, her eyes widening slightly. "Oh." Chloe looked up from her phone, a flicker of interest in her expression. My father finally muted the TV and turned to look at me properly. The room was silent, filled with a sudden, tense anticipation. This was it. I took a deep breath. "I got in," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "I was accepted. I'm going to be a doctor." For a moment, nothing happened. My mother's face broke into a polite smile. "Oh, William, that's nice, dear," she said, her tone the same one she used when I told her I had successfully assembled a piece of IKEA furniture. "Wow, congrats," Chloe said, before her attention was immediately reclaimed by a notification on her phone. I looked at my father. He was staring at me, his expression unreadable. He blinked slowly as if processing a complex mathematical equation. I held my breath, waiting for the explosion of pride, the backslap, the booming announcement that he now had two sons who were going to be doctors. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. Then he spoke, his voice a low, casual rumble that struck me with the force of a physical blow. "Well, I'll be," he said, a slow, incredulous smile spreading across his face. He shook his head slightly as if marveling at some strange magic trick. "We didn't think you'd actually make it." And that was it. There was no malice in his voice, no intentional cruelty. It was worse. It was a statement of fact, a casual admission that my lifelong dream, the goal I had poured my entire being into, had always been in their eyes a long shot, a fantasy. They had never truly believed in me. His words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room, all the joy from my heart. The immense, beautiful thing I had carried into the house just minutes before now felt like a lead weight in my gut. I just stood there speechless. The proud speech I had prepared in my head, the happy tears I had imagined, all of it evaporated. There was nothing to say. He had confirmed my deepest, darkest fear, that I was and always would be an afterthought. "I have to go," I mumbled, backing out of the room. "So soon?" my mother asked, a slight frown of confusion on her face. "Don't you want to stay for dinner?" I didn't answer. I turned and walked out the front door, closing it softly behind me. I got into my car and just sat there for a long time, the acceptance letter a meaningless document on my phone screen. The silence in the car was absolute, a perfect reflection of the hollow space that had just been carved out inside me. They hadn't just dismissed my achievement. They had confessed to a fundamental lack of faith in me that I knew I would never be able to forget. The drive away from my parents' house was a blur. I ended up at Leo's apartment, the only safe harbor I could think of. When he opened the door and saw my face, his celebratory grin instantly dissolved into a look of deep concern. "Will, what happened? What's wrong?" I stumbled inside and collapsed onto his couch, the story spilling out of me in a torrent of hurt and disbelief. I recounted the whole scene, my mom's lukewarm "that's nice," Chloe's immediate distraction, and finally my dad's soul-crushing words. "We didn't think you'd actually make it," I repeated, the phrase tasting like ash in my mouth. He said it so casually, Leo, like he was commenting on the weather, like my entire life's ambition was some hobby he never expected me to be good at. Leo didn't say anything at first. He just sat down next to me, a hand on my shoulder, and let me talk. He let me vent all the frustration, all the years of feeling second best, all the pain that had been brought to a head by that one simple sentence. When I finally ran out of words, exhausted and empty, he spoke, his voice firm and laced with an anger on my behalf that I was too beaten down to feel myself. "They don't deserve you, man," he said. "They don't deserve to share in this. This is your victory. You earned this, not them." He stood up and started pacing his small living room, energized by a sudden idea. "So forget them, forget their approval. You know who's proud of you? I am, Maria is, Sam, Kevin, and Jess are. The people who saw you studying until 2 a.m., the people who proofread your essays, the people who actually believed you could do it." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes shining. So we'll celebrate you, a real celebration, not some stuffy country club thing for your dad's business partners. A real party for you with the people who have actually been on your team all along. His words were like a lifeline. The idea took root in the hollow space inside me and began to grow. He was right. Why was I still chasing the approval of people who were so incapable of giving it? Why was I letting them hold my own happiness hostage? My achievement was real, whether they acknowledged it or not. The joy I had felt when I first read that letter was real. I deserved to feel that again. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper at first, then stronger. Okay, let's do it. A huge smile broke across Leo's face. That's my boy, he said, grabbing his laptop. Now where are we going? No sad little bar, we're going somewhere nice. You're a future doctor, for crying out loud. We need to celebrate in style. The next few days were a quiet act of rebellion. With Leo's help, I started planning. We decided on a small, private dinner. I've always loved a local Italian place called Trattoria di Vento, a warm, rustic restaurant known for its incredible handmade pasta and cozy atmosphere. It was the kind of place you went for special occasions. This, I decided, was my special occasion. I called and booked their private dining room, a small, intimate space that could seat about 10 people, for the following Saturday night. Then I created a group chat. I didn't send a mass text or make a big announcement. I just added the 5 people whose support had been unwavering. Leo, my friends Maria and Jess from my undergrad science program, and my 2 oldest friends Sam and Kevin, whom I'd known since kindergarten. The message was simple. Hey everyone, the news is in and it's good. I was accepted to med school. I'd love for you, my core support system, to join me for a celebratory dinner this Saturday at Trattoria di Vento at 7 p.m. My treat. Let me know if you can make it. The responses came flooding in within minutes, a cascade of capital letters, exclamation points, and heartfelt congratulations. There was no surprise, no disbelief, just pure unadulterated joy for me. It was a balm on the wound my family had inflicted. I was building my own celebration on my own terms, surrounded by my own chosen family. The feeling was intoxicating, a quiet revolution of the soul. I didn't tell my parents or my siblings. They had made it clear where they stood. This night wasn't for them. When Saturday came, I was nervous, but it was a good kind of nervous. When I walked into the private room at the Trattoria, Leo and Maria were already there, stringing up a simple banner that said, "Congratulations, Dr. Will." It was cheesy and wonderful. One by one, my friends arrived, each one greeting me with a huge hug and a genuine, ear-to-ear smile. The dinner was everything my family's celebration for Daniel wasn't. It was small, loud, and full of laughter. There were no stuffy speeches for strangers, just heartfelt toasts from the people who knew me best. Kevin told an embarrassing story about us trying to dissect a frog in 7th grade. Jess and Maria reminisced about our all-night study sessions, quizzing each other on organic chemistry reactions until the sun came up. Leo raised his glass, his expression serious for a moment. To William, he said, his voice full of emotion, who taught us all what perseverance looks like. Key, we never had a single doubt you'd make it. We're so incredibly proud of you. I felt tears welling in my eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. I looked around the table at the faces of my friends, these people who saw me so clearly, and I felt a profound sense of belonging that I had rarely felt in my own family's home. As we were finishing our main course, the door to our room opened slightly. An older man with a kind face and a white mustache poked his head in. "Pardon the interruption," he said. "I heard the celebration. Am I addressing the young man who's heading to medical school?" It was Mr. Henderson, my friend Sam's father. "Mr. Henderson, hi," I said, surprised. "Yes, that's me." Sam told me the good news. "Wonderful, just wonderful," he boomed, stepping into the room. Mr. Henderson owned the local town newspaper, the Crestwood Chronicle. He was a pillar of the community, a man who delighted in celebrating the achievements of local residents. "We're just having a quiet dinner," I said, feeling a little flustered. "Nonsense," he said with a wave of his hand. "This is precisely the kind of thing our town should be proud of. We have a little local achievements section in the paper. Would you mind if I snapped a quick photo of you and your friends? People love to see this stuff, our own local talent making good." I hesitated for a second, a flicker of unease passing through me, but the room was so full of warmth and joy, and Mr. Henderson's enthusiasm was so infectious. My friends were all grinning, egging me on. What was the harm? This was my night. This was my celebration. "Sure," I said, a smile breaking across my face. "Of course." He pulled out a professional-looking camera from a bag he was carrying. "Excellent. Everyone squeeze in. Big smiles. Look proud of your friend." We all huddled together around the table, throwing our arms around each other. I was in the center, holding up a glass of sparkling cider, a genuine, unforced smile on my face. Mr. Henderson took a few quick shots. "Perfect," he declared. "This will be in next Friday's edition. Congratulations again, young man, you've made us all proud." He gave a final wave and disappeared, leaving us to our dessert. We didn't think anything more of it. It was just a sweet, unexpected end to a perfect night. I felt seen. I felt celebrated. I had no idea that a simple photograph, a picture of my happiness, was about to become a declaration of war. The week after the party was one of the most peaceful I'd had in a long time. The dinner with my friends had worked like a reset switch for my morale. It was as if the hurt from my father's comment had been placed in a small box and stored on a high shelf. I knew it was still there, but I no longer had to look at it every day. I had my own narrative for my success now, one written by the people who cheered for me. My days took on a new, purposeful rhythm. I started researching apartments near the university campus, my excitement building as I scrolled through listings. I spent hours in a downtown bookstore, browsed the medical section, feeling a thrill as I ran my hand over the spines of dauntingly thick textbooks like Gray's Anatomy and Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine. These were no longer just symbols of a distant dream, they were the tools of my future trade. This was real. Contact with my family during this period was minimal and superficial, which was a quiet blessing. My mother sent a few texts, the usual mundane check-ins. "Hope you're having a good week. Don't forget your sister's dental appointment is next Tuesday, she might need a ride." Or, "I made that pot roast you like, there's leftovers in the fridge if you want to swing by." There was never any mention of my acceptance, no questions about my plans, no follow-up to the momentous news I had delivered in their living room. It was a familiar pattern of avoidance. In my family, uncomfortable truths were not confronted, they were simply ignored until they hopefully faded away. They had categorized my achievement and their clumsy reaction to it as an unpleasantness to be glossed over. By not speaking of it, they could pretend it never happened. Their silence was its own form of dismissal, a quiet refusal to engage with a reality that didn't fit their established script of Daniel as the sole academic star. For once, however, their neglect didn't sting. It was liberating. I didn't have to perform gratitude for half-hearted praise or navigate their awkward attempts to reconcile their surprise with my reality. I was free. Leo and I met for coffee midweek. He was still buzzing from the party. "Best Italian food I've had in ages," he said, taking a sip of his latte. "But seriously, how are you feeling, for real?" "Good," I said, and I was surprised by how true it was. "Honestly, Leo, I feel light. Like I've spent my whole life trying to win a game that was rigged, and I've finally just decided to walk off the field." "It's about time," he said, his expression softening. "You get to make your own rules now, Will, your own game." We spent the rest of the hour talking about logistics, the pros and cons of living on campus versus off, the best places to buy used textbooks, the terror of student loans. It was a conversation grounded in a future that I was actively building for myself. My family, with their history and their expectations and their quiet disappointments, felt very far away. As the week drew to a close, the photograph Mr. Henderson had taken was the furthest thing from my mind. It was a fleeting happy moment from a night filled with them. The idea that it would be printed in a physical newspaper felt quaint and old-fashioned, an amusing little footnote to my private celebration. I imagined my grandmother might see it and cut it out for her scrapbook. The thought made me smile. Friday arrived, a bright, clear autumn day. I spent the morning filling out financial aid forms, a tedious but necessary task. The sheer number of zeros on the tuition estimates was staggering, but even that couldn't dampen my spirits. It was an investment in the person I was becoming. I had no idea that across town, copies of the Crestwood Chronicle were being delivered to doorsteps and stacked in wire racks outside the grocery store. I had no idea that my small, personal victory was about to go public. Inside that unassuming local paper, nestled between an article about a zoning dispute and the weekly police blotter, was a 4x6-inch photograph. It showed a group of 6 young people, beaming, their faces illuminated by joy and restaurant lighting. The caption underneath was simple and direct. "Local achiever, lifelong Crestwood resident William Pierce, Center, celebrates his recent acceptance to Northwood University School of Medicine with close friends at Trattoria di Vento last Saturday. Congratulations, William." I was at my desk comparing student loan interest rates, completely oblivious. The peace I had so carefully cultivated was fragile, a thin pane of glass. And the first stone was about to be thrown. The storm had gathered silently, and I never even saw the clouds roll in. The first tremor of the earthquake hit my phone at 3:47 p.m. on Friday. I was in the middle of wrestling with a particularly convoluted section of a housing application when my phone, lying face down on the desk, began to vibrate violently. The screen lit up with a picture of my sister, Chloe. I almost let it go to voicemail. My conversations with Chloe were usually one-sided, a monologue of her latest social drama or a request for a favor, but something made me pick it up. "Hey, what's up?" I answered, my tone casual. Silence, then a voice as sharp and cold as ice. So I guess my invitation got lost in the mail. I sat up straight, completely thrown. Her tone was dripping with an acidic fury I hadn't heard from her in years. What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb with me, William," she spat. "It doesn't suit you, the newspaper, the Crestwood Chronicle. My friend just sent me a picture of it." My blood ran cold, the photograph I had completely forgotten. My mind scrambled to catch up. "Chloe, it wasn't like that, it was just a small dinner." "A small dinner that you somehow managed to get into the local paper," she scoffed, her voice rising in pitch. "A small dinner for your real family, I guess." The caption was just lovely. "William Pierce celebrates with close friends." "What are we, William? Your distant, unphotogenic relatives." "That's not fair," I started, but she cut me off. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? I find out my own brother got into medical school, the biggest news of your life, from a tacky photo in the town paper, while I'm sitting in the student union. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" "I told you I got in," I said, my voice defensive. "I told everyone last Sunday you were there." "Oh right," she said with a bitter laugh. "You mumbled something and then ran out the door. That's not an announcement, William, that's a footnote. This party, this picture, this was your real announcement. And you made it perfectly clear who was important enough to be included." Before I could formulate a response, she hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. I stared at my phone, my heart hammering. Humiliation, that was the word she used. It hadn't even occurred to me. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone, I was trying to protect myself. My phone rang again almost immediately. This time it was my mother. I braced myself and answered. "William," her voice was trembling, thick with tears. It was her signature weapon, the one she deployed whenever a confrontation became unavoidable. "William, Chloe just called me, she's hysterical. How could you do this?" "Mom, it was just a few friends," I pleaded, the words already feeling useless. "The newspaper thing was a total accident." "Well then?" "Accident, William, a picture of you celebrating is in the paper for the whole town to see. A celebration we weren't invited to. What are people going to think? What will our friends think? They'll think we're terrible parents, that we don't love our own son." Her voice broke on a sob. "You've made us look like monsters." The conversation was no longer about my achievement or my feelings. It had been twisted into a referendum on their public image. It was about how they looked. The familiar weight of their narrative settled over me, suffocating me. "That was not my intention," I said, my voice flat. "Well, intention or not, the damage is done," she sniffled. "Your father is on his way home from work and he is furious. He wants to talk to you." As if on cue, I heard my father's muffled, angry voice in the background. My mother said a hasty goodbye and hung up. I was left in the ringing silence, my hands shaking. The peace I had cherished all week was gone, replaced by a churning vortex of anxiety and a deep, weary anger. They had done it again. They had taken my one pure happy moment and contaminated it with their own drama, their own insecurity, their own unyielding focus on themselves. The final call came 10 minutes later. My dad's name flashed on the screen. I knew this would be the worst one. I took a deep breath and answered. "Explain yourself," he barked without any preamble. There was no sadness in his voice, only cold, hard rage. "Dad, Do dad me," he snapped. "What was the meaning of this little stunt, this secret party, this newspaper photo? Were you actively trying to embarrass this family, to make a public statement against us?" "It wasn't a stunt," I said, my own anger beginning to rise, burning through the anxiety. "It was a dinner with my friends. The photo was a fluke. The man who owns the paper was there and offered to take it." He let out a short, derisive laugh. "Oh, a fluke, how convenient. You have a secret celebration for the biggest achievement of your life, exclude your entire family, and it just flukily ends up immortalized in print. You must think I'm an idiot." "No," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I just think you don't listen." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You have a lot of nerve," he said, his voice low and menacing. "After everything we've done for you, you will come to this house. Tonight, you, me, your mother, and your siblings. We are going to talk this out, and you are going to apologize for the disrespect you've shown this family." It wasn't a request, it was a summons. A command. He hung up before I could reply. I dropped the phone onto my desk and buried my head in my hands. The peace was shattered. The storm was here. I was being called to stand trial for the crime of celebrating my own life, and I knew with a sickening certainty that in their courtroom I was already guilty. The drive to my parents' house felt like a journey to my own execution. Every traffic light seemed to mock me, holding me for an extra few seconds before releasing me toward my inevitable doom. My stomach was a knot of dread. I called Leo, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. "It's an ambush, man," I told him, my voice tight. "They're all going to be there. Dad, Mom, Daniel, Chloe, they want an apology." "Don't give them one," Leo said, his voice a firm, steady presence in my ear. "You have nothing to apologize for. Just tell them the truth, Will, calmly, quietly. Don't yell, don't let them get a rise out of you. Your power is in your quietness. Just tell them why you did it. That's all you have to do." His words were a small anchor in my sea of anxiety. Your power is in your quietness. I repeated the phrase to myself like a mantra as I pulled into their driveway. The house was lit up, every window glowing, making it look like a stage set for the drama that was about to unfold. I walked in without knocking. They were all there, assembled in the living room like a tribunal. My father was pacing in front of the fireplace. My mother was sitting on the edge of the sofa, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. Chloe was curled up in an armchair, her arms crossed, her face a mask of sullen betrayal. And Daniel, my golden boy brother, was leaning against the mantelpiece, an expression of weary, condescending disappointment on his face. He was here to witness my trial, the benevolent prince observing the disciplining of the court jester. "William," my father said, stopping his pacing. His voice was dangerously calm. "Thank you for coming. We believe you owe this family an explanation and an apology." I took a deep breath, Leo's words echoing in my mind. I looked at each of them, my supposed family, my jury. I decided I wouldn't be the defendant they expected. "I'll explain," I said, my voice even and clear, surprising even myself. "But I won't be apologizing." A flicker of surprise crossed my father's face. My mother flinched. "The party wasn't a stunt," I began, directing my words to all of them. "It wasn't about humiliating anyone or making a public statement. It was for me. It was the celebration I knew I would never get here." I turned my gaze to my father. "Dad, when I told you I got into med school, you said you didn't think I'd actually make it." "Oh, here we go," my father sighed, rolling his eyes. "It was a joke, William, an off-the-cuff remark. You can't take a joke." "No," I said simply. "It wasn't a joke. It was what you really thought. It was honest. And in a way, I appreciate the honesty because it made everything clear. The party wasn't to exclude you. It was to include the people who did think I'd make it. The people who saw my work, who encouraged me, who never once made me feel like my dream was a fantasy." I let the words hang in the air. The silence was thick with tension. Chloe was the first to break it. "So you punished me because of Mom and Dad?" she asked, her voice trembling with self-pity. "I always believed in you. This isn't fair to me." "This wasn't about punishing you, Chloe," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I know you never meant to be unkind, but it also wasn't about you. It was about me for once. It was about needing to be in a room where I was the priority, not an afterthought. You found out from the newspaper, and I am sorry for the way that happened. But I did tell you my news right here in this room. Your reaction was to look at your phone." Chloe shrank back in her chair, a flicker of shame in her eyes. She knew it was true. My mother jumped in, her voice pleading. "We were never trying to hurt you, William. You know that. You've always been so sensitive." "Being consistently overlooked isn't being sensitive, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "It's just hurtful. When Daniel got in, you threw a party for 100 people. You planned it for weeks. When I got in, you said, 'That's nice, dear,' and offered me leftovers. Do you see the difference?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I think she actually heard me. Her face crumpled, the tears in her eyes looking a little more genuine this time. Then Daniel spoke, pushing himself off the mantelpiece. His tone was laced with the smug superiority that had always set my teeth on edge. "You're just jealous, Will. You've always been jealous of my success, and this is just some passive-aggressive way of dealing with it. You're trying to create drama to steal the spotlight." I turned to him, and all the years of resentment boiled down to one cold point of clarity. "No, Daniel, I'm not jealous of you. I'm proud of you. I always have been. But my success is not a reflection of yours. It's not a footnote to your story. It's my own. This isn't about stealing your spotlight. It's about finally being allowed to stand in my own." I recounted everything then, the science fair, the 2 cars, the constant praise for him versus the benign neglect for me. I laid it all out, not with anger, but with the dispassionate precision of a physician diagnosing a chronic illness. The illness in our family was favoritism, and it had been poisoning us for years. When I finished, the room was utterly still. My father stared at me, his face a thundercloud of conflicting emotions. He was a man who was not used to being challenged, especially not by his quiet, unassuming son. "So that's it," he finally boomed. "You're dredging up things from 20 years ago, science fairs and toy cars. You're holding a grudge because your brother got more attention. Grow up, William, life isn't fair." "You're right," I said, and I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The trial was over, and I had been my own defense. Life isn't fair, and I'm not asking for it to be. I'm just deciding how I want to live mine. I'm not going to spend my life begging for the approval that you so easily give to Daniel. I'm done playing that game. I looked at my family, truly looked at them, and saw them not as giants whose opinions could crush me, but as flawed, complicated people. Their reactions weren't about me, they were about them. My father's anger was his defense against feeling like a bad parent. My mother's tears were for the disruption of her carefully maintained peace. Chloe's hurt was the shock of not being the center of attention. And Daniel's condescension was the insecurity of a golden boy who was afraid his shine might be fading. They were waiting for my apology. They were waiting for me to break down, to concede, to restore the old, comfortable order. I knew I couldn't give them that. The confrontation ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, unbridgeable silence. They stared at me, waiting for me to recant, to soften, to do what I had always done, absorb the discomfort and smooth things over. But I had nothing left to say. I had laid my truth on the table, and they could either pick it up or leave it there. "I think I should go," I said into the stillness. My father just grunted, turning his back to me to stare into the cold fireplace. My mother looked at me, her eyes pleading, but she said nothing. Chloe wouldn't meet my gaze. Only Daniel held my eye, a look of grudging, resentful confusion on his face. I had broken the rules of the game, and he didn't know how to play anymore. I stood up and walked to the door. With my hand on the knob, I turned back one last time. "I do love you," I said, and it was true. It was a tangled, painful love, but it was there. But I can no longer spend my energy trying to earn my place at this table. My door will always be open, but my life and my achievements are no longer up for your review or your approval. The relationship we have from now on will have to be different. It will have to be based on mutual respect, which I will show you and which I now require from you. Then I walked out. The click of the door closing behind me was the most liberating sound I had ever heard. The drive home was different from the one coming over. The dread was gone, replaced by a vast, quiet emptiness. It wasn't a bad emptiness, though. It was a clean slate. I didn't feel angry or sad. I felt free. A weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying, the constant, exhausting weight of expectation and hope, had been lifted. I had stopped trying to push the boulder up the hill. I had simply let it go. The days that followed were transformative. I threw myself into the practicalities of my new life. I signed a lease on a small, sunlit apartment just a few blocks from the medical campus. Leo came over with pizza and beer to help me assemble the cheap, flat-packed furniture. As we struggled with the inscrutable instructions for a bookcase, laughing and getting everything backward, I felt a sense of home that I hadn't felt in years. "So have you heard from the firing squad?" Leo asked, wiping pizza grease from his mouth. "Just a text from my mom," I said, holding a shelf in place while he tightened a screw. "She asked if I was moved in yet." "And what did you say?" I said, "Yes, things are coming along well. Hope you're all doing okay." Leo smiled, polite, distant, perfect, "You're learning." He was right. My reply had been cordial but devoid of the old neediness, the implicit plea for more. It was just a statement of fact. The ball was in their court now. The silence that followed from their end was no longer a punishment, it was a consequence. My new life began to take shape, filled with new people and new challenges. Orientation week was a whirlwind of new faces, campus tour, and intimidating speeches from deans. I met my anatomy lab group, a diverse collection of brilliant, nervous, and exciting people from all over the country. When they asked me about my family, I kept it simple. "My brother is a second year at another school," I'd say. "My parents are proud of us both." It was a simple, public statement of a reality I was choosing to build, regardless of whether it was entirely true yet. About a month after I had moved, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, padded envelope with my mother's handwriting on it. Inside, there was no letter, just a small, framed copy of the photograph from the Crestwood Chronicle. There was a little sticky note on the glass on which my mother had written 3 words, "You look happy." I didn't know what to make of it. Was it an olive branch, a passive-aggressive jab, or was it perhaps a simple, true observation, a quiet acknowledgement of the happiness I had to find for myself outside of their orbit? Maybe it was the first tentative step in her learning a new way to be my mother. I took the photo out of the cheap frame and pinned it to the corkboard above my new desk, right next to my class schedule and a picture of Leo and me making faces at the camera. It was a reminder not of the family I had, but of the support system I had built. My relationship with my family is still a work in progress. It's marked by long silences and occasional cautious attempts at connection, but something fundamental has shifted. I no longer go to them for validation. My sense of self-worth is now being built from the inside out, fortified by my hard work, my new friendships, and my growing confidence in my abilities. I am becoming my own son. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm studying at my desk and the city is quiet outside my window, I look at that photograph. I see the young man in the center, his face bright with a joy he thought was dependent on others. I want to tell him that he's going to be okay, that his greatest achievement wasn't getting into medical school but finding the courage to celebrate it. So now I turn to you, the audience. Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between the family you were born into and the person you were trying to become? Sometimes the hardest part of growing up is realizing that you have to be your own biggest cheerleader. The applause you seek from others may never come, but you can learn to clap for yourself.